Hi, welcome to the next of our webinar, where we'll be talking about managing employees' mental health. I'm joined by Rachael Alexander, who'll be taking you through today's session. So today it's part of the Grow My SME programme, which there are a number of different workshops providing support for local small businesses. We want to try and make today as interactive as we possibly can. So if you do have any questions, you should see a little section with a questions button on your dashboard. So do put any questions you may have during today's session in that little section there, and we'll come to them at the end. We've got plenty of time for questions going forward. As I say, this is part of the Grow My SME programme, so do have a look at the other events that we've got coming up to have a look, see whether any of those may be of interest. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Slides we will email out after today's session, so you should get a copy of all of those slides after today. And if you've got any further questions regarding the support that's available, please do contact the Humber Business Growth Hub. So without further ado, I'll pass you on to Rachael, who will take you through today's session. Rachael.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Managing Your Employees' Mental Health. I'm delighted that you've decided to join me this morning because it is such an important topic, especially in these uncertain times. So let me just introduce myself a little bit and tell you why I'm talking on this subject. So I'm a workplace mental health psychologist, and my passion is mental health, basically, and it's about helping people understand what mental health is, and more importantly, how to have awesome mental health. I think a lot of people, when they think about mental health, only think of the symptoms or diagnosis of mental health, such as anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, etc. But actually, mental health is so much more than that, and that's hopefully what I'm going to get across on this webinar today. So my background is I've got 2 degrees, one in counselling psychology and one in consciousness psychology. But what I like to think that I do is make quite a complex subject as simple as possible. So I hope that you'll enjoy this presentation, and please, if you have any questions going forward, there is no such thing as a stupid question. So please just put them in a chat box, and we've got plenty of time to answer those questions. I'll give you my details at the end, so if you have any questions, you can always drop me an email. And if you would like to explore more about what Humber Business Growth offers, then please check out their website, growmysme.co.uk. So let's begin. So this webinar I actually used to deliver well before COVID. So it's not specific to COVID per se, but of course what's going on at the moment is challenging people's mental health. So let's have a look at why should we be prioritising mental health. And in some places they do call it mental wealth, and all that is making sure that your employees have such good mental health that it means they are productive in the workplace. So that's what we want. We want employees who are enjoying coming to work, who are committed, who are engaged, and therefore they are productive, they complete their tasks, they complete their goals, and therefore the company achieves their objectives. So let's just look at 4 reasons why we should be prioritising mental health in the workplace, regardless of what's going on at the moment. So the first one is, like I've just said, business productivity. If you have employees who are suffering with their mental health, they are not able to be as focused and as committed on their role with somebody who has good mental health. And that's simply because of what's going on in how their brain is working and how their brain is operating. So I'll talk about that more going forward. Number 2, the job role of a manager is to be able to have the confidence and knowledge to manage mental health matters. And what that means is to recognise basic signs and symptoms of mental ill health. And you'll see that it's basic signs and symptoms. So that's just basically if somebody's not on their game, and we can all have the awareness of knowing if somebody's just not in a good place. We should, as a manager, know when and how to intervene. And the reason why I've put intervene is in red is because that's what you are. You are an intervention. So you are not there to fix or rescue or come up with all the solutions to what is causing the mental ill health. You are just there to be a signpost, to be able to help the employee access some positive support. And that links into a manager should know what additional support is available for themselves and the employee. Because let's remember, as a manager, as a leader, you are an employee yourself. Number 3, empowerment. So a leader's role is to equip your staff to have the knowledge, tools and confidence to look after their own mental health. And that's really important, that when we start talking to our staff about mental health, it is in a position of empowerment. It is a gift that we are giving them to help them increase their awareness of how important their mental health is, and therefore allowing them to take responsibility to make sure that their mental health is adequate for the job that they are coming to do. And again, I'll highlight the differences later of the manager's responsibilities to do with mental health and the staff member's responsibility to do with managing mental health. And number 4 is one of my favourite because it's just the right thing to do. You know, if we can help others just smile a little bit more, worry a little bit less, be able to achieve their potential, then that, I find, gives people a really good feeling. Interestingly, ACAS, from a poll that they did, found that 73% of employees think it is a manager's role to recognise and address stress and anxiety in the workplace. That's very important, that just in the workplace. So I'll be talking later in the webinar about how there's stress and anxiety caused in the home life and how stress and anxiety can be caused in the workplace and who's responsible for managing who. So, you know, I'm sure there's lots of other reasons why we should prioritise mental health, but these for me are the most important reasons. And if we start to think that our workforce is our greatest asset, you know, you see I've read a lot of business books that say, you know, your customer is the greatest asset. And actually, I actually believe that your workforce is your greatest asset, because without your workforce, you probably wouldn't have the customers. So we service our car so it stays in optimum condition. And so why wouldn't we think helping our staff to stay in optimum condition is so important? So ensuring that we have good mental wealth in the organisation is so important, not only for morale in the workplace, but also for productivity as well. And, you know, just think that if that petrol light comes on your car, you immediately stop, and like me, who tends to stay in the empty zone for quite some time. But when that petrol light comes on, that it's telling you that the car needs more petrol, you know, we see it as a sign that we have to stop and go fill up with more petrol. Otherwise, the car isn't going to go and get anywhere. And that is as simple as analogy for us as humans. You know, we will get very, very tired and we will get very low in energy. But how many of us actually stop and go and refill our energy? And in November, I'll be running a webinar of talking around burnout and talking about managing the stresses and pressures that we face as business leaders. So check out growmysme.co.uk and, you know, register for that webinar, because that's going to be much more personally talking about what happens when we as a leader get burnout. So workforce is our greatest asset. If we can help them stay in optimum condition, it's going to help us help them achieve the targets and goals, and our business is going to grow in the direction it needs to grow. So why would companies choose to not prioritise mental health? And I've been doing this work now for over 15 years. And what I see is that organisations are quite scared of talking about mental health, managers and leaders tend to be a little bit want to avoid talking about mental health. And I think it is exactly as the image shows, because they're scared of what might come out, or they're scared of the conversations they may need to have with employees, or they're scared that, you know, by admitting that a staff member has got mental health challenges, it doesn't mean they're going to go off sick for months on end. So I can understand why, you know, most managers and leaders don't want to talk about mental health. You know, I've studied for 6 years in the area of mental health. So for me, I'm not scared of it because I understand it. But if you've not had the training that I've had, then it's understandable that you don't want to address mental health. So I hope that this webinar really eases the concerns and maybe the fear that you have about talking about mental health. Because guess what? You will be doing it already. You will be talking about mental health already to your staff members. You're just not realizing that you are. So as I say, I hope that by the end of this webinar, you'll feel a lot more reassured and not as scared to be able to talk about mental health. I'll also be giving you a template of questions, of a structure that you can talk about mental health monthly with each staff member. So you can actually start to have conversations about mental health and have the confidence to do that through the template that I'll be sending you. That's on this webinar, but you can have a copy of the PowerPoint slides, of course. So how poor mental health affects business productivity. So this data came from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. I think it was about 2016. And what they found was that poor mental health affects the following areas. So the highest percentage is difficulty in concentrating. So if my mental health, I'm struggling with it, I am going to have difficulty in concentrating. It will take me longer to do tasks. I'll struggle to make decisions. I won't be able to juggle a number of tasks. I'll just have to focus on one thing. So if I'm working on something and the telephone rings, I'm going to struggle to be able to do both or to understand which takes priority. I'm going to be less patient with customers and clients. I'm going to be a little bit more irritable. I'm going to put off challenging work, and I'm more likely to get into conflict with others, whether that's my manager, staff members, senior leaders, etc. So that's how business productivity does get affected. So the more staff that we have with poor mental health, the bigger these issues are in our business. And that's why it's so important to start talking mental health to your staff. So what is mental health anyway? So let's make it as simple as we can. Poor mental health means the way that you think, feel and behave means you struggle to think logically, make decisions and unable to focus on task. So mental health is, guys, the way that you think, feel and behave. So just like physical health is about how we are physically, mental health is about how we're thinking and how we're feeling and how this then connects to our behaviour. So last week I was supposed to be away in Turkey. It got cancelled 24 hours before, but I'd booked a holiday because I could tell my mental health was starting to struggle. I was irritable, I was losing my passion for my work, I was worrying about things, I had apathy. So I realised that I needed to take a break from my work and I needed to go and properly rest in the sun. As it happened, it didn't happen. But I took a week off anyway, so I'm all recharged and raring to go today. So that's what mental health is. How am I thinking? How am I feeling? And how do those two things affect my behaviour? So if we have poor mental health in the workplace, we've got low engagement and we've got high presenteeism, meaning staff are not focused on their work. What this means is employees are unable to focus on their job and therefore they fail to be a revenue generating asset. And I'll tell you a little story. Years ago, I was at, sorry, let me turn that off. It never rings my telephone, never give my number out. Sorry about that, guys. Years ago, I was at a business meeting like a networking event, and I got sat next to this elderly gentleman who had retired years ago but had many fingers in many pies, and you know, business pies. And he said to me, "What do you do, Rach?" So I started to tell him that, you know, I'm about mental health, and I want employees to feel positive and empowered, and, you know, so that they enjoy life. And he looked at me and he said, "That doesn't interest me as a business owner." So I said, "What, you're not bothered that, you know, your staff are not, you know, positive and happy?" And he said, "No, all I'm bothered about is how do they affect my bottom line? Are they making me money?" And it really shocked me, because I'm sort of like a little bit of like a, you know, happy clappy, oh, let's have everybody be happy, and sometimes not realizing the business sort of like effect. And he gave me a real gift, because I thought, yes, actually, if I had you know, a multi-million-pound business with all these demands and all these pressures, I'm wanting to make sure that the money's coming in, because I'm going to have to pay a lot of money out. So, you know, that's really about mental health. There's two prongs to it. Is it for you on this webinar? Are you wanting your staff to be happy so they have a better quality of life? Or are you wanting your staff to be earning you money? And both can be true, or one of them might be true. And it doesn't matter, as long as we're helping people, I feel, to be happy and the business is growing and the business is becoming more successful. So on the flip side of poor mental health, we have good mental health. And, you know, quite simple, the way you think, feel and behave enables you to think logically, stay focused and are motivated to achieve tasks. And then we have high engagement, low presenteeism, employees commit to their job, and they become a revenue generating asset. And that's how simple it is. And I think a lot of business owners are not making the connection that if they invest the money in helping staff manage their own mental health, then the business is going to become more productive. And so it's going to offer a high return on investment, because we're going to be earning more money, because staff will be able to be focused on their job, make decisions and be logical. And that's really how simple it is, and how simple mental health is. So what we can see is that our mental health gets affected by a range of factors, and these factors are called life. So on the left-hand side of the scale, we could have poor mental health, and on the right-hand side of the scale, we have good mental health. And any individual at any point in their life can be at the right-hand side of the scale or the left-hand side of the scale. Even me, with my experience and my knowledge and my wisdom, I can sometimes dip down to that poor mental health side of the scale. And what I have to do is stop, say, hang on a minute, this thing isn't working as well as it should. What do I need to do to get it back up to the good mental health? Hence why I'd booked the holiday, but yet still took a week off this last week when it got cancelled. So anything that's happening in our life can cause us to have poor mental health or good mental health. If we have too many pressures in our life, it can make us slide down to the poor end of the scale. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples later of some past clients of mine, all anonymous, and you can see how their mental health became affected and went to the poor end of the scale. So stress is the first sign of deteriorating mental health, and we can all at any time start to suffer with stress. And if you look at what the definition, there's many definitions of stress, but this is my favourite definition. Stress is the perceived demands placed upon us versus our perceived ability to handle demands. So for example, myself offering online webinars, I've been doing them now for some years. It doesn't give me stress because I know that I can handle it. But for some people who had to start having meetings online, it would have caused them stress because the perceived demand of them being able to conduct a meeting online was higher than their perceived ability to handle the demand of conducting a meeting online. So as you can see, what's really important there is the word perceived. It's all our perception of events. So stress is actually an internal reaction to external events. So if we've not been raised to be able to handle pressures and responsibilities very well, then we're going to think that we are unable to handle the stress and pressures and demands very well. And this is why resilience training is so important, because what it does is, as adults, it teaches us to be able to handle all the different demands in life, whether they're caused by home or work. So you'll have staff members who have very high resilience, which means you can throw a load of stuff at them and they will just get on with it, and they will just do it, and they will tell you if they're struggling, or they will tell you if they want more work. So they've got a very high resilience in that they have a very high perceived ability of what they can handle. Yet you'll have some staff members who are the opposite. You just maybe give them 2 or 3 things and they go to pieces. It's like they just can't operate. And what we tend to do is we tend to measure everybody by those high resilient people. Yet what we've got to remember is not everybody is like that. So we've got to start having conversations with our staff members to get their perception of what their ability is and give them the confidence to increase their resilience. So number 2, you don't have to be an expert to talk about mental health. You're not going to start talking at the level that I would start talking to people about the mental health. All we have to do is be able to create a space where the subject is allowed to occur. We're allowed to have the dialogue about what mental health is. And you might be the only person in their life that is bothered about their mental health. And that is a real gift to give to somebody, to say, I am creating this space because I care about you enough to be able to ask how you are and to offer some unconditional support if I can. And that is a real gift to give to people. And the real danger is the culture of silence. You know, I've worked with business leaders where they know that their employee is struggling, but they do nothing about it. And that is the real danger element for me. So we need to be starting to have a conversation, and we need to show vulnerability from the top. And we need to be able to talk about our own mental health in such a way that it's not stigmatized as weak or insecure or that you can't cope, because we all have mental health. Like I've said, I do. I sometimes check in with a coach or a counsellor or a therapist just to say, I've got this thing going on in my life and I just need an objective view here. I just need sort of like something to help me that I can't help myself with at the moment. And that's not a weakness, that's a strength to be able to ask for support and ask for help. So stress is the first sign of deteriorating mental health. And harmful levels of stress lead to anxiety and depression. So stress doesn't just come out of anywhere, it builds up slowly. It slowly builds up. And I've got a great analogy of this. I have a mirror in my bedroom, and the other day I put sort of like this positive sort of like plaque, and I just rested it on top of the mirror. And it hardly weighs anything, this sort of like thin metal plaque, you know, the ones that say, you know, live, love, laugh, all those sort of things. It hardly weighed anything. And so I just stood it on sort of like top of the mirror. And in the middle of the night, the whole mirror fell off the wall. And so clearly that little bit of extra weight from that plaque, the nail couldn't handle it. And that's really like our life. We can be dealing with absolutely loads of pressure and responsibility, and then literally one thing could happen. You could be, I don't know, going for a car park space and somebody gets in before you. And that literally makes the house of cards all come down. It's just like the last little thing that you cannot tolerate. And so, you know, you could go for counselling, and a good counsellor will not focus on the fact that you didn't get the car parking space. A good counsellor will want to know what was going on for you as you was going into that car parking space. So what was in your bucket of life? What are all the things that you're dealing with? Because that's the real issue, not the fact that you didn't get the car parking space. So contributing factors to stress, bereavement is a massive one, because what most people do is they maybe grieve for the few days and then they just go, right, that's it, you know, I've had the funeral, we've had the wake, let's get on with life. And that doesn't, you know, happen that way. Bereavement is a long process of emotionally healing. Financial problems can cause stress. Relationship breakdowns or relationship problems in itself, they don't even actually have to break down. You know, relationships which are toxic or which are not harmonious, where people are just in for the duty or that you know, well, I got married, I can't get out of it. Relationships itself are massive factors to stress. Family problems such as parents, you know, as adults we can still have challenges with our parents or challenges with our teenagers or our children, all cause stress, all cause pressures and demands. And of course, ill health or even family members that have had ill health. My sister had a cancer all last year. And of course, it was another pressure. It was another responsibility on me. I chose to go with her to the appointments and, you know, the chemo and help her through it. So, you know, everything can go into, imagine a bucket. Everything is going into this bucket of our life. And if we don't have a way of letting out the stress, then the bucket will overflow. So we have to be aware of that and we have to be able to self-nurture and self-care. Work is also a big cause of stress, or can be. So the workload, too much, too little. The way that we are managed, 40% of our stress can be caused by the way that we are managed. And I've had senior leaders in with me in my coaching room who are struggling because of the way they are being managed in a coercive, controlling, bullying manner. And even though they are these strong, powerful people, they're still getting, you know, overwhelmed with the stress and the responsibility and the way that they are being managed. And being able to balance our home and work life is a key cause of stress as well. So, you know, we can be at work and we've got a piece of project to finish, but then we know that we have to get home because otherwise our partner is going to say to us, why are you working overtime when you don't get paid for it, or something like that. So it all adds into that bucket of tension, problems, you know, resentments. It all adds. So this is where the stress can come from. So I just want to give you a couple of examples. The names are made up, but the scenarios are actually accurate over the term of coaching that I've been seeing clients. So I want you to imagine that Angela is one of your employees. So she's 46 years old and she is an only child. She has no brothers or sisters. She has 3 children aged 5, 10 and 15. She recently found some weed in her eldest son's rucksack and approached him to talk about it. But the conversation resulted in an argument and they are now not speaking to each other. Her 5-year-old has started with night tremors and climbs into her parents' bed frequently. Angela recently attended a parents' evening and the teacher expressed concern regarding her 10-year-old daughter's hostile attitude. Angela's overtime has also been stopped at work, which is affecting payment of household bills. Her mother has just started with signs of dementia, and her father, who has always suffered with depression, is struggling to cope looking after his wife. Angela also thinks she's starting with the menopause as she's having hot flushes and feels lethargic. So that's just what's going on in Angela's bucket, if you like, at the moment. And we've not even looked at other challenges she may be having at work. All we've looked at is the fact that her overtime has been stopped. So what you can imagine there is Angela will be feeling very, very stressed, I would imagine. So if she's coming to work with all this in her head and trying to think of solutions, trying to think of action that she needs to take to be able to sort all these issues out, you can imagine that the amount of energy that's taken to focus on what's going on her home life is well affecting her tasks that she has to do at work. You know, she's very unlikely to be looking happy. So, you know, customers are probably going to be picking up on it, probably going to be affected by it. So let's look at another example. David is 32 years old, has been married for 5 years. He and his partner have no children currently and have been trying to adopt for the last 2 years, but the process is taking time. His partner has recently obtained a promotion at work, which has increased responsibilities, meaning his partner is more withdrawn and irritable than usual, causing challenges in the relationship. David's parents divorced when he was 12 years old and he witnessed domestic violence. His best friend from university recently committed suicide, which was a real shock as he didn't know she was feeling this way. To help him cope with his grief, David has been drinking more red wine than usual. He's thinking of going to the doctors to get some antidepressants as he's feeling helpless and lost. So again, what we can understand from David here is, there's going to be a lot of frustration. There's going to be a lot of helplessness because he's been trying to adopt for 2 years, which is a stressful process, but it's taking time. On top of that, his relationship is now struggling. So in his mind, hang on, should I be adopting? What's happening to my relationship? The fact about his parents divorcing when he was 12 and he witnessed domestic violence means that he's had some trauma in his life, which means he will be affected by future events, much more vulnerable to experiencing stress. If as children we've witnessed traumatic events, we have high spikes of cortisol in us, and cortisol is the hormone that can cause stress. So we tend to be hypervigilant. We tend to be sort of like try to keep in control more, to try and feel safe because we didn't feel safe as a child. So to help him cope with his grief, obviously Dave is drinking more red wine, which is not a good thing to do because that puts more stress and pressure internally on the body. And it means the cells can't work in the way that they should be working. So therefore, his energy, his mindset, his mood will be on a downward spiral. Hence why he's thinking of going to the doctor to get some antidepressants. Now, just to say on antidepressants and medication, what we've got to be careful of is if Angela or David went to the doctors to get antidepressants and told the doctor everything that was going on in their lives, it would be understandable that the doctor would say, oh, yes, you sound, depressed. Here's a tablet. Now, what that tablet is there to do is to change the chemicals in the brain to try and make the person feel better, to reduce the emotional pain that they're experiencing. Now, when I have people in my room, I ask them, are you on antidepressants? And if people have recently gone on antidepressants, they say to me, yes, but I don't like the feeling. I feel zombied out. I can't feel anything. And that's the whole point. The antidepressant doesn't know just to stop the chemicals that produce negative feelings. It also stops the ability to feel the positive feelings as well, such as joy, excitement, happiness. So the tablet doesn't go and solve the problem. The tablet isn't able to help David work out his relationship. The tablet isn't able to make the adoption process get sorted. Yeah, the tablet can't stop his friend, hasn't stopped his friend from committing suicide. So taking a tablet doesn't sort the issues which are causing the feelings that you're experiencing. So when I was feeling quite run down, the reason why I booked a holiday, there would have been no point me taking a tablet because what I had to learn was I'd been working too many hours. And that's because I love my job. I love making a difference to people. But the downside of loving your job is sometimes you have to say no. And that's what I'm not very good at. If I can help people, I will do. So, everything in life is a learning experience, and the tablet doesn't help us in some senses. There are some people that do believe that tablets are essential to get the brain chemistry back flowing. I'm not experienced enough to be able to comment on that. The point of these two slides, guys, is just to show that your staff members will have stuff going on in their life that you probably are not aware of, that is causing them stress, pressure, resentments, negative feelings. And whilst we probably don't want to get into all that stuff, just to be able to intervene and signpost for help would be a really positive thing as a leader and a manager to do. So how stressed will these employees be feeling? Well, we've discussed that. How likely is it that these employees can focus on their work 100%? Hopefully you'll agree, very unlikely. And what would be the financial benefits of supporting these employees? And I think what we would get is employee loyalty, and that's really important in these times. So what we need to be looking at staff is, how do we train them to be resilient? So educating employees to handle challenges, which means whatever happens, they don't get overwhelmed and stay focused on their tasks. So if we could help Angela and David to, manage everything that's going on in their life and still focus on their work task, then it's a win-win. It's a win for them and it's a win for us as an organisation. So how do we recognise poor mental health? Well, there's lots of great data out there online. Mind.org do a really intense list of thoughts, feelings and behaviours that show poor mental health. So, check out mind.org. They've got a great list there, but I'm just going to run through some of the common ones. So, obviously absence is a good indicator, and what you'll find is it's very unlikely that somebody will ring up and say I've got stress or I've got burnout. They'll ring up and say, I've not been sleeping, or I've got headache, or I've been sick, or I've got diarrhea or whatever. They'll use a physical reason because they don't want to admit that there's a mental reason. They can be negative or unmotivated. Often people think that people are negative and unmotivated because they've just maybe been in the job long enough, or they're just one of those negative types of people. But that's not often the case. It can often be that they're just feeling so overwhelmed with pressures that they just haven't got any energy to be positive. Life has become very dark. Life has become very overwhelming. Life is not fun. And so they're very low on energy, so they're unable to be positive and motivated. So changes in productivity. I did some coaching recently for a lady, and her boss had referred me because he said she absolutely used to be on it and 100%, and she's just not that person anymore. And when after a few sessions, she was suffering really badly with burnout. Mood changes. So, somebody that's been positive for so long and then slowly they don't seem to be smiling, or quite snappy or negative. Tiredness, and this is one where a lot of people can relate to this, that you'll think that you're tired, so you'll go to bed and you'll get a good night's sleep, but you'll still wake up in the morning equally as tired or even more tired, and no matter how much sleep you get, it doesn't make a difference. And that's an example of stress and burnout and poor mental health. This is what happens to me. I come to tears easily when I've got poor mental health. It's like I get upset a lot easier than if I've got good mental health. Losing tempers easily. So if you've got staff members that just seem that little bit more snappy or irritable, then time to have a conversation. Look harassed, you look withdrawn. Using substances. So you might hear people say, gosh, I've started drinking on a Tuesday night now, or I've started, I'm smoking more, or you might see them vaping more or whatever. They're trying to use the substance to get them into a more positive place because they're just not feeling that positivity. They may respond when you ask them how they are. Yeah, fine. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Without, they don't want to go into detail. It's like what people do is they just regress into this like cave, this just leave me alone, I can do that. I messaged a friend of mine a couple of months ago to just say, do you want to meet for coffee? I'd not seen her for a few months, and I didn't get a response from her. And about 2 months later, she literally messaged me saying, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't reply. I was in a really, really bad place. And I just didn't want to put that negativity on you. And I was like, really like, gosh, if you can't, if that's what a friend is for. But I get that sometimes we just want to go insular and we withdraw from people. And that's a sign that our mental health is struggling. We struggle to make decisions, and we can have conflicts with colleagues. So they're just a sign that you may have staff members that actually are struggling with their mental health, but you may have labelled them as just negative or unmotivated or not engaged, but actually there may be a bigger reason for their behaviour. So let's now look at responsibility. Because what is common is managers can think it's all their responsibility to be able to make the staff member have good mental health, and that's not the case at all. As you can see, it's a very balanced approach. So let's look at the employee responsibility first of all. So as an employee, they have a responsibility to manage their home life. So if something is causing them stress, it's their responsibility to go in and deal with those issues. So if we look at Angela, it's her responsibility to sort out a 5-year-old, 10-year-old and 15-year-old. That's not for you as a manager or a leader to come up with solutions or fix or, be sort of like this godlike figure that has to make her 5, 10 and 15-year-olds suddenly start to be happier. But what a lot of employees do is they ignore their home life and they don't look at what's going on. And so they don't face it. So it's their responsibility to face their personal issues and their home life. Now, if we were chatting with Angela in a one-to-one and she told us, oh, my 5-year-old's this, my 10-year-old's that, my 15-year-old's this. And if we just said, okay, what do you need, Angela, to sort that out? She might say, I need to go and speak to the, to my teachers of my 10-year-old and my 15-year-old. So I need some time off, some flexible working to just go and have that conversation. So bang, straight away, we've been able to intervene and assist there to be able to help her face her personal issues. So we've asked her what she's needed. She's told us what she's needed. So as a manager, as a leader, if we can help her sort that out, then it's a win-win, because then when it's all sorted, not only is she going to be uber thankful for you supporting her, but she's also going to have the mental capacity to then refocus on her work. So facing personal issues and home life, taking care of their well-being. So again, if we're talking to employees about their physical well-being, how are you taking care of your mental, your emotional, your physical well-being? Then that's going to, oh, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, bless me. Excuse me. Oh, sorry, I just need to put my battery on as well. It's all happening at once. Don't want to lose you all. MacBooks do tend to lose the battery quite quickly. There we go. We will be having a break, guys, just to say in about 10 minutes, just for you to go have a toilet stop or grab a cup of tea or whatever. So taking care of their own well-being is their responsibility as well. Receiving help, whether that might be in the form of listening to you or professional support, is the employee responsibility. So the template that I'm going to give you later for having these conversations with your staff members, the template is excellent for you as a manager or a leader, because what you're going to be doing is documenting that you've offered help and support. Now, whether your employee chooses to take that help and support is their responsibility. But if they don't choose to take the help and support and their performance still deteriorates, then you have a good reason then for maybe helping them exit the business, because you've offered them the support, you've offered them the help, they've chosen not to take it, so therefore they have to live with the consequences of that. And you've got it all documented, signed, dated, so that covers you just from a legal human resources perspective. So manager's responsibility is to just at least discuss mental health. And I'm going to show you how to do that after the break, very simply. Your responsibility is to be aware of the workload. And that's as simple as asking your staff member once a month in a chat, how are you finding your workload? Is it too much? Is it too little? Anything I can do? That's all it takes. Offering support. What can I do to help you with your mental health? 8 words, 10 words, you've offered support. Being flexible, such as offering Angela time to go and sort out her children's issues, seeing if David wants to go and see the employee counsellor, you've been flexible. We're going to talk more about adjustments later on in the webinar, and there are adjustments that you have to make to help people with their mental health upon certain conditions. But I actually say if you can make the adjustments anyway with your staff, then make them, but I'll talk about that later in the webinar. Signposting to follow up to other sources of support, again, I'll give you more help with that. And most importantly, follow up. So if we're going to have a chat with our staff member about their mental health, and we come up with a list of actions that they're going to do and we're going to do, make sure that you follow it up the next month. Did you go and do those actions? These are the actions that I said I'd done. Are you happy with those actions that I've done? And being comfortable with emotions. Excuse me. So it's very important that if your staff members get upset, that you're okay with sitting there while they get upset. They're just releasing chemicals from the body. That's literally all crying is. It's a release of chemicals, a release of hormones. So it's important that as a manager, we're comfortable with our emotions, whether our staff members are getting angry, whether they feel helpless, whether they feel frustrated with us as a manager. We have to be comfortable with those emotions. So what causes mental health issues to deteriorate? Gosh, I do struggle with that word, deteriorate at work. So 50% of poor employee mental health is caused by a combination of issues at work and home. And again, that was from CIPD in 2016. So what, again, we have to be aware of as a manager or a leader is, does our organisation promote well-being or does it trigger problems? Because we want to be in the first bracket rather than the second bracket. So if we have people working long hours and not taking breaks with unrealistic expectations and deadlines in a high pressure environment, or equally with a lack of meaning or purpose, these are all contributing factors to whether we're triggering problems in them or promoting well-being. Unmanageable workloads, lack of control over work. If there are any negative relationships between manager, employee, or even just with two employees that sit next to each other, or even just poor communication, again, it all goes into that label of promoting well-being or triggering problems. An unsupportive workplace culture or lack of management support is often a key thing that I'll work with when I go into organisations and help build a mental health policy for the organisation. Job insecurity, so at the moment, obviously a big issue for a lot of people to have job insecurity. High risk roles such as, police, social workers, ambulance, all those sort of like frontline workers. High risk roles can actually cause a lot of burnout in a lot of people, and we have to be aware of that. Learn working, so COVID has been a trigger for a lot of people. And demanding clients and customers. Again, if we're in on a complaints line or something like that, then it's more likely that our mental health can be triggered into a negative space. So, just have a little check yourself. And, if you're listening to this and you work in HR or you're a senior leader or a manager, and just sort of do a little bit of reflection and think, how many of those are visible in our organisation, and it's not for you to sort everything out next week. This might be a year-long project that you do to try and improve the working culture of your workplace. Okay, so we're going to have a stop there because the latter part of the session is I'm going to give you a 4-step process of how to create an awareness of mental health, be able to have conversations with your staff members about mental health, and also, detail any action to improve. So I'm going to talk about that. So let's have a look at the time. So it's just do it by my iPhone. That's so let's say 10 minutes. So if we come back let's say if we come back at 5 past, I think that's probably enough time to be able to grab a drink, check an email, etc. So yeah, so it's 5 to now, just coming up to. So let's come back at 5 past. Any questions from anything that I've said this morning? Please just put them in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end of the session. Thanks, guys. Just give it a minute or so, just for the last few people just to come back. Looks to be a beautiful day out in Hull. It's nice sunshiny. Okay, so let's start the second part of the webinar. So welcome back. And now we're going to look at a much more how to apply the learning. So it's much more practical this afternoon. Sorry, I normally deliver this in the afternoon. This session is much more giving you practical tools and tips is what I'm trying to say here. So we're going to look at the 4-step process. So we're going to start with how would you actually create an awareness of mental health in your organisation? What does that look like? Then I'm going to give you a template to talk about how to have the conversation with your staff members around their mental health and looking at different actions to improve employee mental health. And the most important part of the whole process is how to review and follow up. So let's start with creating the awareness. So really, really easy. All we're going to do is start to talk to our staff about mental health and what that is. And as an organisation, how we are going to start looking at mental health. And, you know, what I would say is make sure you have a mental health policy. And that should sit alongside, you know, your absence management policy, your recruitment policy, your grievance policy, all should feed in together. And if you've got a mental health policy, you then know how to operate. So it's like your map of the world, if you like, regarding mental health in your organisation. If you need any help with mental health policy, then please get in touch with me. Under the Grow My SME, there is some funding available from the SME, from the Humber Business Growth Hub to help you implement a mental health policy. So we also recommend, you know, literally just team chats or one-to-one chats. And it's about educating, first of all, your employees about what mental health is. So just like I did, showing you that mental health can be on a scale with poor mental health, good mental health. And mental health is just what are we thinking, what are we feeling, and how is this affecting our behaviour? So literally, do you remember that slide I showed you with the line with the good and the poor mental health? You could literally just have one of those in your office or, you know, dotted around the office with it just saying, you know, where is your mental health today? And just to bring the awareness to people that mental health is not this big scary subject. It's just basically as you would with your physical health. People will tell you if they physically feel well or not. You know, they'll be sat there saying, oh gosh, I feel really tired, or I've got a stomach ache, or I've got a headache. They have no problem telling you how they feel physically. What we're going to do is try and create the conversation about how they feel mentally. I'm feeling fed up, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling helpless, I'm feeling excited, I'm feeling positive, I'm feeling focused. That's how simple it is. How are your staff think? What are they thinking and how are they feeling? So if we can just start having team chats and talking about, you know, how are your thoughts affecting your feelings? How is your behaviour at the moment? Are you motivated? Are you unmotivated? Are you feeling stressed? What's causing the stress? Is there anything that we're doing that's causing you stress? Having those conversations just suddenly brings it all out into the open. So like that image shows, it's not the elephant in the room anymore because we're all talking about how we feel mentally. You could have awareness days, so, you know, hashtag mental health Monday. So, you know, drop in and tell me how you're feeling mentally. Tell me how the weekend affected you. You know, if somebody's in a challenging relationship at home, weekends are probably not good for them. So on a Monday, you know, they may feel the workplace is a place of safety. It's a place of distraction. So, you know, we could talk about how was your weekend? And that's what I said earlier. You're probably all doing this anyway in your own way. We're just sort of like going to, you know, make it a little bit more structured, I guess. So take advantage of notice boards. But what I would say is, you know, don't just put a sign on the notice board with, you know, the Samaritan's phone number on or something like that. That's not really doing it, to be honest. This is about, you know, if you've got a notice board, put something on it that says, you know, we do care about your mental health. Please come and talk to me, or here's a mental health ambassador, or, you know, drop me an email about if you're feeling stressed or pressured or resentful. Please just talk to me about it. So make notice boards work for you. Newsletters, again, you could have a mental health newsletter, so you could have somebody in your team that's responsible for collating a newsletter around mental health that could just start educating people around mental health, what sources of support there is locally, people that have gone from having poor mental health to good mental health, and what they did, such as, you know, they started meditating, or they started reading self-help books, or they stopped watching the news, etc. You know, you could really create a really good employee newsletter around how to help people have good mental health. Because remember, what we're looking for is for people to be thinking positive, so that then they feel positive, so that then the behaviour is positive. It all stems, mental health all stems with negative thoughts in our minds. I'm no good, I can't do this, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling pressured, oh God, the future's so uncertain. That's all negative thoughts. And if we're thinking negative thoughts, we produce negative chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol. And when we're producing negative hormones like that, well, they're not negative actually, because they save our life in some cases. But when we produce a lot of hormones like that, it's very easy to become very stressed and to become very hypervigilant, and it burns our adrenal glands out. And that's when we start getting poorly. So very important to help our staff think more positive so that they feel more positive. And that's often about helping them think more positive about themselves as employees, as individuals. I've got delegate there because there will be somebody in your organisation that is very passionate about mental health. There always is. In every organisation I've ever worked into, when we've asked for, you know, we've said we're going to set up a forum to start focusing on mental health, there's always a handful of people that are really passionate about it, and they'll be the ones that drive it forward for you. You can look at charity events, so raising money for you know, charities, and, you know, just a temperature check. You know, that scale of poor mental health, good mental health is a scale of 0 to 10. So you could have that drawn out in your office, and you could have staff just come and put a post-it note up with, you know, where they are on that scale, a number 7 or a number 6. And, you know, and if it's below number 5, you know that you need to have a chat with them. So it's a way for staff just to reach out and say, I'm struggling, I need some help. So it's a really positive way to be able to just create that dialogue. So that's step 1. Have a think about how are you going to create awareness about mental health in your organisation. And again, Mind have wonderful resources on their website that are free that you can tap into that will help you create an awareness about mental health. It's very important that we remove the stigma about mental health, and that's why I particularly tell, you know, people at my workshops and webinars and conferences that, yes, sometimes I have poor mental health because I'm human, and I will do, like anybody does. So it's really important to lead from above. So if you as a leader, you know, can relate to anything that I've been saying today, then share that story with your staff member, because then they can look at you and say, wow, if he or she's willing to share that, then actually I feel safe enough to share that. Some leaders, managers won't suffer with mental health because, as I said earlier, they have some people have very high resilience. So they won't suffer with mental health, but that often can make it harder when they have staff that do, because they just don't understand what that's like. So it's being able to, you know, be able to get into the other person's shoes and think, yeah, okay, they're feeling like that. Just because I don't feel like that doesn't mean to say that it's wrong to feel that way. So it's important to share our own stories. You know, if we've lost somebody to suicide, or you know, that somebody's, you know, been diagnosed with something, then, you know, important to share the story to make it real. So we remove the stigma by being vulnerable, you know, by saying, yeah, I sometimes get really stressed. Yeah, sometimes I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I can't get back to sleep because I'm worrying about something. But this is what I do to stop myself worrying about it. So be vulnerable, be humble, that we can all suffer with mental health at any point in our life. It's just basically the universe giving us too many pressures, too many responsibilities, and us thinking that we can't handle those responsibilities or pressures. But we have to learn to be able to handle them by reaching out for help, being open to support, by maybe changing, a situation. On the burnout course that I'm going to be offering next month, I'll be talking much more about, the spiritual reason for burnout, which is the universe saying, hang on, are you living the life that you actually want to live? Because it's draining you of your life force energy. And what can you do to be able to add to your life force energy? So how much joy are you feeling? How much are your relationships in harmony? How much is your work giving you passion and meaning? So I'll be talking much more individual on the other course, how to manage the demands and pressures of a small business leader. That's the course I'm referring to. That's in November. So being transparent, being humble, taking it seriously. One of the first modules I ever had on my counselling degree was one of the first lessons, tutor time. What do you call them? Gone up my head. Lectures, that's what I'm thinking of, was about that if a client came to you and they were upset because they dropped 10p down the drain, you let them be upset about dropping 10p down the drain. It didn't matter if you was thinking, God, it's only 10p, what are you so upset about? Doesn't matter. To them, they're upset that they've dropped 10p down the drain. And that's what we have to do. We have to take challenges seriously. So if you have a staff member coming to you saying, my boss really shouts at me, take it seriously. Don't try and say, oh, that's just what they're like, or yeah, sorry, they're feeling a bit stressed. Take it seriously, because that's upsetting them. It's causing them pressure and it's causing them stress. Talked about having a mental health policy, and look at right at the start of bringing somebody into your organization. Do you talk to them about mental health? Do you tell them that you take mental health very seriously, that we're very invested in your well-being, we're very invested in how happy you are, in how productive you are? So how is that reflected in your recruitment process and then in your induction training? So step 2, have the conversation. And I really like this image because, as we all know, if, we've broken our arm or leg, it's clear that we're not all right. But, when it's all up here in the head or in the way we feel, yeah, it's not as clear. And the only way to get some clarity is to have a conversation. So let's give you a structure now in this section. So the first thing is, how do you talk about it? Well, you do not have to be an expert, like I said earlier, in mental health. That's not what, is being expected of you. This is about you using your leadership skills, common sense, empathy, being approachable, a listener, carer, solution focused, motivated. All the skills that have got you to the position you are is enough for you to be able to talk about mental health in the workplace to your employees. Reassure them that you are there to help and be part of the solution. You are not there to solve the problem. That is not your job description, to solve their problems. You are there to help and be part of the solution. And even imagine Angela or David having a chat with you and you're sat there saying, I'm going to be part of the solution. Just imagine how powerful that could be to them. It is not about diagnosing or finding a cause. I know there's the mental health first aid course, which is very useful because it talks about the different diagnoses, but actually that's not your role as a manager or leader to diagnose. That's not even my role. I'm not a medical profession. I'm not a psychiatrist. It's not my role to diagnose a mental health condition. So it's not your role either. Try not to use medical language such as you seem depressed or you seem to have generalized anxiety disorder or bipolar or whatever. Stay away from that. Just stay with the feelings. You seem really fed up. You seem really tired. You seem really frustrated. You seem really overwhelmed. That's literally all that's needed. Try not to make it about you, but be open to sharing your experiences. So that's where the vulnerability comes in, the transparency comes in, the sharing your experience to make them feel that you are one of them. You have felt these things. but not as in, yeah, I can't sleep either, it's horrendous, isn't it? Which is what I once got told by a client that her boss had said to her. It turned into this sort of like competition of, who had the worst mental health. She didn't go to him for that. She went to him for an intervention. Reassure them it is private and confidential, but whilst being mindful of what they are telling you. So obviously, if they say to you, yeah, I opened the tablets last night and I really did think about taking all these tablets, then, you may need to talk to them about, right, I'm concerned now, who are we going to be able to bring in to make sure that you're supported away from the workplace? But obviously, it's private and confidential away from other staff members. So that's how you talk about it. So use language that suits you both. And so here's just some examples of sentences that you could use, but of course, change them into the way that you talk and that the language you would use. So I noticed that you have been fed up and wondered how you are. How are you feeling? You seem a little down recently. You seem to be overwhelmed. Is there anything we can do to help? Yesterday, I sensed you were unhappy and wondered if we could talk about it. Part of my role is to look at the demands being placed upon you at work, and I wondered if you'd like to give me some feedback. We don't seem to have laughed much recently. How are you feeling about work at the moment? So hopefully what you can see is this is very down to earth, very relaxed, very normal, if you like, way to just open that dialogue, create that space to be able to tap in to help somebody feel safe enough to be able to talk to you about how they're feeling. Once they open up, keep calm. Remember, you are not a counsellor. So you could ask some questions such as, gosh, how long have you been feeling so fed up? Does anybody else in your family know about it? Have you spoken to anybody at work about it? Is there any way your work may be negatively affecting this situation? Now, sometimes work positively affects situation because it gives somebody meaning. It gives somebody a distraction. It gives somebody a reason for self-worth, self-esteem. So if you ask the question, how may your work be positively affecting this situation? You might get somebody say, oh gosh, yeah, I love it when I can just come in, focus, head down. But it's the meetings that I really struggle with. I'm struggling to interact in meetings at the moment, for example. What would you like to happen going forward short term? So can you see they're all open questions. We're asking the individual, what's going on for you? Now, you might get some employees that are so far burnt out that they just answer, I don't know. I don't know. And they may just get really upset or they may just run out the room. That's probably at a point that burnout, their mental health needs some external, more support, such as a coach or a counsellor. And I'll be giving you a list of resources at the end. So if you get to that point where they're just sitting there and they just say, I don't know what I need, I'm just fed up, then what they need actually is longer sessions to be able to help them explore this and heal from whatever is causing them the trauma. So this is the template for having effective conversations. If we were face to face, this would be in a workbook and there would be space underneath each question. So if you're going to use this template, you might like to, type it out, and then underneath each question there would be a box where the answers would go into the box. But obviously, because it's online, we can't do that. So a template for having effective conversations. So I envisage that you would do this probably monthly, probably 6 weeks, probably once a quarter, and just to help you get a temperature check of what's going on for the individual regarding their mental health. So, number one, what helps you have good mental health? And in brackets, I like to say stay stress-free, because the challenge that we have is that not many people understand what good mental health means. If they do, brilliant, but I like to, when I'm working with employees, say stay stress-free at work. So can you see what we're doing is we're asking the employee to come up with the answers there. So they may say something like, when I can just focus on my job, when I don't get deadlines that are unrealistic, when I'm set targets so that I know that I've done a good job, for example. What can we start doing to support you in having good mental health at work? Now, what I would recommend with this whole template is give it to a staff member probably before your meeting so that they can have a think about the answers. But tell them, look, don't worry if you can't come up with anything. We will talk about it in the session, but just so that they've got some ideas that they can sort of like introduce to you that then you can explore in the chat that you're going to have with them. So what can we start doing as an organisation to support you in having good mental health? Or what can I start doing as a manager to support you in having good mental health? Then we're going to ask, what can you do to support yourself in having good mental health? And as you can see there, we've got at home and work. Now, you will have some employees that do not want to talk about their home life at all. They just will not open up about it. And that's fine. We can't do anything about that. But at least we're giving them the option to try and support them. So, you know, if later on, if the performance suffered so bad that you know, it was a productivity issue and you did have to go down the grievance route, at least you can say, well, we asked to support her, you know, we offered support for home and work, but as you can see by the form, she didn't fill anything in, or he didn't fill anything in, so we didn't know that, you know, there was all this going on at home because they didn't share the information. But at least it shows that you've covered yourself. Number 4, how will I know if you have poor mental health, stressed, including any early warning signs? And again, hopefully the employee might say something like, I just go really quiet, or I become really irritable, or you'll hear me saying that I opened a bottle of wine on a Tuesday night or whatever, just so that you can recognise it. What support can we put in place when you start to struggle with poor mental health? And sometimes it's just as easy as a staff member might say to you, can you just ask how I am at the end of the day? It's often the really simple things that don't cost time, that don't cost money, don't cost, you know, any change in policy. It's just that human connection that most people want. So what support can we put in place when you start to struggle with poor mental health? Number 6, what do you need from me, the organisation or your colleagues going forward? So for example, Angela might have said, well, actually, I need to go visit some care homes and the only appointment that I can get is 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. Is there any way that I can change my shift next Tuesday? Great, yeah, we'll help you do that. So you can see that you've you've given the opportunity for the staff member to, you know, ask for what they need. And then we're going to make it very productive. So what 3 actions can we take as an organisation, or I can take as a manager to help you right now? What 3 actions can you take right now to help yourself? So this is where we'd be looking for maybe Angela to say, well, I need to make an appointment with my 15-year-old's form tutor, or I need to go see the doctor about the night tremors of my 3-year-old, 5-year-old, whatever. So, you know, you would document them, and then the next time you would meet, you'd say, right, how did it go with the doctor? How did it go with the teacher? And what you're doing is building in some accountability there, because what you're saying is, I care about you. I care about your mental health. Which again, that's all any of us want. We just want to know people care about us. Anything else you would like to share which you feel is important for us to know? So you're giving them a space to share anything at all. And as the trust is built up, you know, you'll find that they'll start to share more things with you, which helps you build a picture of the type of employee that they are. Number 10, how happy are you with the outcome of this conversation? And again, you're just giving them the opportunity to, you know, say, well, actually, I'm unhappy because you've not listened to this, or I'm really happy because now I feel listened to. Ensure you both sign and date the meeting notes. And that's really important from sort of like an audit point of view, to show that you're both happy, you both were there, and you both sign in the notes. Now, just to show that for some of you, if you've not taught mental health with your staff and you've not carried out a mental health type of chat with your staff, then it might feel a little bit scary. And this is like, I quite like this slide because it describes the process of us developing as human beings. So as you can see, we've got the comfort zone here, and that comfort zone is where we feel safe and in control. So many of us, well, most people, operate in a comfort zone from the minute they get up to the minute they go to bed. They repeat the same behaviours. So, you know, tend to get up at the same time, either have breakfast, the same thing for breakfast, go the same way to work, put the same sort of clothes on, the same sort of aftershave or makeup or whatever. And so we become very habitual as humans. We just repeat the same behaviours because we feel safe and we feel in control. But comfort zone is actually the wrong word, because we come a bit like zombies. Maybe it should be called the zombie zone, in that we very rarely stop and say, is the way I'm living my life bringing me joy and happiness? Because we've just learned to live on habits and patterns. So when we're relating to this, to talking about staff, we're probably in our comfort zone by not talking about mental health. So then when we listen to something like this and we think, actually, yeah, I can see the benefit of talking about mental health, we then move into the fear zone. And this is where we may find excuses, we get affected by others' opinions, we have a lack of self-confidence. So we'll talk ourselves out of doing something, such as having a chat with mental health. So you might say to one of your senior leaders, do you know what, I'm going to start talking about mental health to my staff every month. And their fear might say, oh gosh, no, I won't do that. So-and-so started to do that in accounts. Oh God, it turned into a right nightmare. And so straight away, you're like, whoosh, back in the comfort zone. Oh, I won't bother. But you know, it's being aware of whether it's fear. So I'll be saying to my 15-year-old all the time, find the fear, and then you know what you need to do. We need to overcome our fear. So then when we decide to overcome our fear, we move into the learning zone. We acquire new skills, we're extending the comfort zone, and we're dealing with challenges and problems. So when we're first having those conversations with staff about their mental health, we're in this zone here, the learning zone, which is awesome because we're acquiring new skills. Once we become really comfortable, we're then in the growth zone. So we might set some new goals around talking about mental health with our staff, or we might start running some workshops with our staff about mental health. And so this process, moving from the comfort to the growth zone, for me, is the whole point of being a human. It's the whole Maslow self-actualization triangle. If I'm growing as a human, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually every day, then that's the meaning of life, and that's what gives me joy. So you can apply this image to anything going on in your life. Okay, so step 3, take action. And I'm just going to talk here a little bit. In fact, let me just go to the next slide. I'm going to talk here about the Equality Act 2010 and reasonable adjustments. Now, if you want any more information of this, if you go to the mindfulemployer.net. So sometimes with some employees, we do have to make reasonable adjustments, and I'll talk about what those reasonable adjustments are. So let's just go through when do you have to do reasonable adjustments? So employers must make reasonable adjustments to make sure workers with disabilities or physical or mental health conditions aren't substantially disadvantaged when doing their job. So we're talking about people that have a mental health condition that is recognised as a disability under the Equality Act 2010. Which shows that you're disabled if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. And substantial and long-term means that if it takes longer than normal to do something. Now, what people normally ask me at this point is, how do I know if a staff member has a mental health disability under the Equality Act 2010? And my answer is, they probably will have told you. They probably will have told you. So this isn't about an employee saying to you, oh yes, my mental health is a disability, and you thinking, oh gosh, I've got to offer all those adjustments, because they have to prove that it's recognised as a disability. So, and only qualified professionals can make this judgment. So the employee must obtain advice or evidence and cannot make that judgment themselves. So it would be prudent to use, professional expertise at this point. But my experience tells me that employers usually will tell you if they've got a mental health disability that's recognised under the Equality Act. So if they have, there are some reasonable adjustments that an organisation has to make. Now, what I would say myself as a psychologist and understanding human behaviour is, if you can offer these reasonable adjustments regardless whether somebody's got a disability under the Equality Act or not, then you're creating a positive culture for mental health to flourish. So you have employees with good mental health, which means they're going to earn you money. So altering start and finish times, flexible or reduction in working hours, altering break times, altering targets or tasks. So say, for example, my friend's husband has just sadly passed away. She's not going to be on her game at work for probably some months because it was a shock and it came out the blue, and she absolutely adored him. So as a manager, I would be wanting to have a conversation with her to say, right, what can we do to help you right now? You know, what is it that you need to be able to deal with this massive life event whilst making sure that our business needs are met? So how can we balance the two? So it might be, she might say, well, you know, I just don't feel as though I can speak to somebody. If she's on a customer helpline, for example, I just don't know what would happen if somebody rang up and wanted to, you know, register a death and take them off the direct debit system or something like that. Oh, okay then. So how about we move you to off the telephones for 3 weeks or so? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So it's just about being that compassionate, empathic manager or leader to say, wow, what can we do right now to help you deal with these life events that you're going through? Might mean a reallocation of duties, introduce a buddying system, so somebody that they feel safe, that they can check in with or talk to. It amazes me how companies don't tend to have mentoring systems. You know, it's so powerful to have a mentor that you can be able to go to and check things out who is more experienced, you know, more qualified. Working from home, obviously most people are having to do that now or did have to do that. Working from another location, flexibility with appointments, offering additional training and support, offering coaching or medical you know, guidance in some way, just simply giving time out, and even just offering a safe space zone. You know, I saw in COVID that the NHS in Hull sort of had a room when it was all at its height that nurses could go into and sort of like have a bit of a wobble, if you like, and, you know, a bit of a cry after, you know, dealing with such sort of like fear and you know, panic, etc. So those are all reasonable adjustments that if somebody's got a disability under the Equality Act that you have to make. But as I've said, I would recommend seeing if you could implement some of those or all of those into your workplace, still ensuring that obviously your workplace still gets their needs met, objectives still get met, etc. Okay, final step is reviewing and following up. So please keep notes to protect you both and monitor actions. Obtain agreement on accuracy, and that's the signing of the form. Reassure your staff member that they are valued and are supported, and if they need anything in the meantime up to the next review, to come and have a chat. And set a date to follow up and stick to it. And as I said at the earlier of the onset of the webinar, that's probably the most important, because you've sort of like opened up this space, you've opened up this support. To then not follow up is giving the message, oh, not really that bothered. So please try and set a date to follow up and stick to it. And also remember, poor mental health does not equate to poor performance. So I know at the beginning I said that, you know, it's poor productivity from poor mental health, but with the right support, those struggling with their mental health can thrive at work. And that's what you're doing with that template. You're making sure that they may have poor mental health, but you're making sure that they can still perform to the best of their ability. And that's from a report that was done by Stevenson and Farmer in 2017, which is quite an interesting report. If you search for that online, Theresa May asked for the report to be commissioned, and it's quite in depth, but it's really insightful about how workplaces need to be prioritising mental health because it's a real possible danger. So sources of support that you can offer to your employees: practical coaching. You could offer, you know, you might have somebody in the workplace that's qualified as a coach that they could go to. There are plenty of charities out there, Mind being a really good charity that offers support. Clearly there's NHS support, so people can self-refer to NHS support. They don't have to go via the doctor. There's a self-referral mechanism, and you can just search for that online, you know, NHS support in my area, and there'll be lots of telephone numbers that came up. Of course, is like myself, private therapists, private coaches. I get referred employees from quite a lot of organisations locally to help them with stress and burnout, etc. There's an employee assistance scheme. You may have an employee assistance scheme, or if you haven't, it might be worth researching it and, you know, seeing what it can offer. And of course the local GP. But what I will say is the GP is trained to give a tablet. That's what a lot of GPs are trained to do. There are some really insightful ones in the area that understand it's looking at the past and looking at what's causing the mental health to suffer. But it just might be, you know, the GP might be able to think, no, I'm going to refer you for counselling or coaching. But as I said earlier, you can refer direct to the NHS for support. And, you know, finally, just remember that you are an employee too. So who's there to support you? You can't pour from an empty cup. You know, take care of yourself first. And there's a really good book, I'm sure some of you have heard of it, where what can happen is, as a manager, when people, your staff, come up to you and give you their problems to sort out, imagine them as monkeys, and they're taking the monkey off their back and they're putting it on your back. So this is not about you putting all the monkeys on your back at all. This is, remember, it's about you creating a space to then say, what do you need from me as a manager right now? How can I help you? Where can I signpost you to? How can I make some reasonable adjustments so that you can go and sort the issues, the pressures that are causing your mental health to suffer? So you're not there to solve. And remember, you know, you need to check yourself into some source of support as well. You know, it's a really hard role, the manager, because you start like getting the pressure from up above down, pressed down onto you, but then you're getting the weight of, you know, your staff pushing a lot of pressure onto you. So please make sure that you reach out for that support yourself as well. So finally, before we go on to questions, do remember you are not some sort of God. You are not there to make it all better. You're not expected to give all the solutions. Some of you will be helping your employees with their mental health naturally. Well done. And don't let fear of saying or doing the wrong thing stop you from being human. I think we can all get a little bit paranoid sometimes in case, well, we can't say that, we're not allowed to say that. Where I come from is, as long as my intention is pure and from the heart, from what I'm saying, then how can it be wrong? So if it's a loving intention, how can I be wrong? So please don't let the fear of, you know, that, oh, you're not allowed to say that, stop you from being human and caring about your employee. If you're interested in discovering the level of mental wealth in your organisation, I've got a short survey, and if you ask for the presentation on PowerPoint, you'll be able to copy and paste that and click in and do the survey. And what that survey is about is just giving you some useful information about how well your organisation is preserving the mental well-being of your organisation, of your employees. And Humber Business Growth Hub, there is 40% funding eligibility for organisations who want to implement a mental health policy and procedures, or who simply want resilience training. And so if you apply to them, you know, you'll be offered a different suppliers. One of them will be myself, and we can have a chat about what actually is the right thing for you. My website, actually, that should just have a hyphen in there. It's Rachael-Alexander.com. So it's just Rachael-Alexander.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. If you've got any questions, you can contact me through my website, Rachael-Alexander.com. So that's the end of the theory. We'll go on to questions, but the session objectives, hopefully you've understood your role and responsibilities regarding employee wellbeing. You now understand what good mental health is and how to recognise poor mental health in yourself and others. That was that list that we talked about of tears, upset, apathy, etc. You hopefully have an understanding of how to help your employees take responsibility for their own mental health. There is another webinar that I deliver, which is purely focused for employees in helping them to take responsibility for their own mental health. So if you own a company and you want to take advantage of that webinar, then please get in touch. How to have an effective conversation with your employees regarding their mental health. So again, that was the template structure that we talked about. And how to take ownership of providing optimum working conditions to promote positive mental health in your workplace. And that was the list of, working hours, breaks, negative communication, etc. So everything that we've discussed is tied up in those objectives, I feel. So, any questions? We now ask Peter to come back on and talk about, relay any questions that may be asked.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for that. It's certainly a thought-provoking workshop, I will say. We have got a question come in, but I'm just going to mention here about questions. If you've got any questions, do put them in the chat function, and we'll make sure we answer those going forward. So the question I've got is, if you suspect an employee of having issues at home, how is best to broach that with them? Are there any key points to consider?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because a lot of employees obviously are quite fearful about talking about the home life. A lot of people are raised with the attitude of, don't tell anybody at work what's going on in home life. So it is quite a difficult subject and to broach. And the only way that the employee is going to tell you is if they feel safe. So it's about creating a really safe, trusting environment for that employee to open up. So you could use a little bit of self-disclosure about what's going on for you, or what's gone on for you in the past and how that affected your work life. Reassure them that everything that they tell you is private and confidential, and that that it's safe, that it's just between you and that individual. Talk about more sort of like how issues at work can make you, how issues at home can make you feel. So for example, you might say, oh, I was in a relationship once and it made me feel absolutely sort of like helpless and stuck, and I didn't know which way to turn, but what I realized was by speaking to somebody really helped me. So talk about more how they might be feeling, rather than trying to get sort of like the behaviors out from them. And yeah, and just use sort of like that intuition, that sort of like sense, as in like, I'm suspecting there might be something going on at home, which I really want to help you with, but clearly I respect your, right to not share that with me. Why don't you have a think about it and maybe come back, in a couple of days and just see if there's anything that you want to tell me. You could offer them to write it down to you. They could, literally go home and sort of like write you a letter. For some people, that's a lot safer than actually saying it out loud, because the challenge that we've got is when somebody says it out loud, it means they're admitting it, and it means it's real. And so what they often think then is they have to do something about it. So if I admit to you, manager, that my relationship at home, for example, is toxic and is causing me problems, then I have to then do something about it. So it's reassuring people that just by speaking about it doesn't mean you have to do anything about it. There's just a release in being able to talk about what's happening. And then gradually, as the awareness drops into the consciousness that it's not a positive thing that's happening, then eventually we get to the point of going, okay, I need to do something about it. So yeah, they're just fear. It'll just be fear that's stopping them from opening up. So if we can make them feel safe and trusted, that they trust us, then hopefully over time, it might take 2 or 3 meetings. I have it with clients where I'll maybe do like 3 one-hour sessions over 3 weeks, and then on week 4 they'll tell me something really like impactful that actually if they told me on week 1 it would have made a big difference, but that was them learning to trust me and learning that they could tell me that information, and so that I could hold that information for them. So you might have 3 monthly reviews with them, and then on month 4 they might feel then safe enough to tell you about it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Now, I think that's all the questions we've got so far. I'm just going to check through what we've had in. Yeah, that's all the questions we've got. So thank you very much. As I say, this is part of the Grow My SME program, so do have a look at the further events we've got on the Humber Growth Hub website, which is up there. And just have a look at the Grow My SME section for the further events. We've got some really interesting events coming up. I think it just remains for me to say thank you very much, Rachel, for today's presentation.
Thank you to the listeners.
It was certainly, as I say, I found it quite thought-provoking and interesting. And also to thank everybody for attending today's session as well. it's great to see you here and taking advantage of the sessions that we're putting on. So thank you very much, and yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody.